Good morning, Ron. It's 2:44 where I am, and obviously 7:44 where you are. Hopefully the sound and image levels are acceptable to our viewers. So let's get started. You've had some interesting topics lately, especially the one about the shofar and the even the Admiralty Law, and the theme constantly of 555 and 666 and all of those keep coming up. So I'd like to, yes. I've been talking about discernment, because people say, okay, how do we tell truth from lies, and how do we navigate all of this? And it's obvious that we are learning to exercise our discernment. Without discernment, we're pretty much lost, because our reasoning is very much conditioned. So if you have a jumble of perceptions and even a jumble of feelings, unless you can navigate those feelings and figure out what's really yours and what is a stimulus from the outside and what's programming, you're going to have a hard time doing anything. All of this is part, and it's very good that the ambassador had brought up this whole number symbolism thing, because that very helps put all of these complicated topics into a much simpler perspective. Often we tend to go into complex spiritual type perspectives because they sound good, and because we get the illusion that we're actually at that level of perception because we can talk about it, which is not the case most of the time.
Not with me anyway.
Yes, not with me either. The thing is, you keep it simple, but at the same time, don't oversimplify, because then you can fall into habit type, thoughts and conclusions. So you had mentioned certain topics that were very, very complicated, like the shofar, for example. And you had mentioned about religions and their books, and most of the Eastern religions don't relate to war. Actually, from a deep mystical perspective, no religion relates to war, not even the Hebrew Bible, because they consider all of that allegorical. It's a spiritual allegory. It may be based on historical things, but back in those days, the world was warlike. There was no such thing as a spiritual people as opposed to a secular people. That is, political prejudice has always been. There are spiritual individuals. We have not yet reached a place in our society where we can speak of a whole people being spiritually oriented as a whole.
Or metaphysically aware.
Or metaphysically aware. Religions have tried to do that, but they could not just because there are manipulated factors who want to control people, but because the people themselves are not receptive to that kind of dynamic. And if you really understand human nature, you can look that, okay, it's no surprise that they're not receptive. So when you talk to people, and a lot of rabbis and priests and pastors and whatever, and all of these sages from these religions will say that, look, back in those days, people understood war. So when you wanted to talk about spirituality, and you talked about, one faction coming and storming a city and whatever, people would understand that. But it's a metaphor. Even though today, metaphor is very stark, because we're not local. We're very globally oriented. So war is, if it's a personal experience, it sucks. But usually it's not, now it's a personal experience in our heads, even if we're not on the battlefield every day through the media. So it's a whole different, we're bombarded with war in a whole different way than in the past. In the past, your village got raided once, everybody died. If you lived, it was fine. You moved on, and it was a traumatic experience, and you understood it. But it wasn't, the rest of the time was peace. There were great distances between towns, villages, and all of that. So it wasn't like every day. At most, in ancient Greece, for example, they had raids. The city-states would raid each other, and there'd be fatalities and stuff like that, but it wouldn't be like Genghis Khan running over the European continent or something. So the Bhagavad Gita, for example, and the Ramayana and these texts, and the Vedas speak about war and conquest, but it is not a war against, it's not designed to refer to specific people fighting other people. It is a war against forces, a war against ideologies, a war against vibrations. It's all about vibrations, and thus it is the war within the individual that is projected as the war in society. And the whole thing, that is basically a pragmatic dynamic that all esoteric teachings have tried to present, that the individual and their relationship with other individuals, and then the relationship with society, these are three tiers of the same dynamic of human experience, what we call the inner and the outer. However, we can also distinguish a middle layer between the inner world and the outer world. This middle layer, where the inner and the outer penetrate, occurs in our most intimate relationships. This is where our inner world basically is reflected in another person, for better or worse. Their inner world is reflected in us. And this is probably the only time we actually, the average person even, can experience a fusion between inner and outer worlds. And you know, and I know how difficult that is, how challenging that is, how confusing that can be, how overwhelming that can be, how easy it is to say, fuck it, you know.
Well, I'm still in the place where I haven't completely gotten over that most recent relationship with the married lady. And I mean, I'm as much as I preach, don't beat myself up, it's really hard not to get in that place where I say, why was I so stupid? And yet I did open up many new areas there during that period of time and did feel tremendously open and loving. And yet, in retrospect, I feel that the damage was horrible. I mean, I still am overwhelmed by those emotions of that failure, if it can be termed that.
Well, failure is a relative term, as we know. The thing is, if we distinguish the situation into inner and outer, we always have a way out. You see, if we're in the inner and it's too much, we go to the outer. The outer doesn't mean we go to a war zone or something. We just focus on our job, our life, the matrix, blah, 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 and all of that. Distractions. If we focus on the outer and it becomes overwhelming, then we go to the inner, escapism. So each side is actually the scapegoat of the other side. It can be, and it's also the haven or the escape from the other side. And that is the problem with that situation of having inner and outer and that only. It takes a lot of esoteric maturity. It takes a lot of experience with the outer first, which means observation, analytical capacity, intuition, reading other people and all of that. But it would be more in a detached mode. And it also takes a lot of experience on the inner with your own self to be able to not fall into that trap, but you're still walking a razor's edge. You don't know when you're escaping. You know, you could be saying, and you even said yourself, look, you can be working on the inner and it's not going to help the outer one iota. Or you could be working on the inner not enough, not in the right way. You can be subconsciously avoiding the true inner and actually creating a facade of working on the inner. Or you can just not be seeing what's going on the outer because your discernment isn't subtle enough. The same thing with the outer. The world affects us. And if we go tell people how much the world affects, oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, you're just, you're just, you gotta be more detached. Yeah, but if I'm detached, how can the outer affect the inner? You know, how can that link be connected? There is one arena where we cannot avoid the fusion of inner and outer. That is intimate relationships. Yeah. And so if you get an idea how fucking difficult intimate relationships are, then you have an idea of why things aren't progressing between the inner and the outer. I mean, we're confronting the craziness right there. It's unavoidable. It becomes both our outer world and our inner world, and we have nowhere to run. You know, it's like you can run, but you can't hide in that kind of situation. You have to break off and then either hide your own inner or else hide your outer. So most people who, and there are many people who are in intimate relationships and they're doing just fine. However, I'm saying, well, if you are in this intimate relationship and you open up to the world completely, in your sense of intuition, vibration, whatever, and you also open up to yourself completely, you will find that the relationship is going to be the fulcrum, the meeting point of these openings, and you will find that even the most harmonized relationships are going to encounter stresses. Stresses are caused by mood changes in people. They're caused, I mean, somebody feels, oh, I'm feeling discomfort now, I'm with the other person, and it's not, you know, the boat's rocking, what's going on? So we look for reasons, and then blame might come in and whatever. Rarely do both people say, oh, we're encountering a vibration from the outside, or we're encountering some kind of trauma that we're both experiencing on the inside, and because we're connected, we're feeling our own past pain. Rarely are people mature enough to do so because they have no realistic context for it in a comfortable relationship. The thing is, the challenge would be that if you have a comfortable relationship, enter into discomfort. You have to be able to enter into discomfort, and you know it's a great opportunity for healing. But a comfortable relationship, although rare, may also be another form of escapism, where the two people basically are complicit with each other to keep a kind of peace between themselves so they can deal with the stresses from the outside. This kind of escapism cannot happen in a person who is formerly inner-oriented very, very much, or outer-oriented very, very much. For example, you have been very inner-oriented and outer-oriented, but bouncing back and forth usually. So you cannot, in my honest opinion, and I'm the same way, avoid stresses in intimate relationships because you carry the world and you also carry the depths of your soul into those relationships, and there's no stone left unturned. So whoever you confront is going to be faced intuitively with that fact, because if you bring that, they're going to be challenged to bring it. They're going to be challenged to expand in areas they have never expanded. And they're going to have to make a choice, but most people don't. They don't even realize there is a choice. And in fact, when they do realize it, they sometimes feel betrayed, like it's all your fault that they have to face shit now. So, you know, that's when the
I've had that happen over and over again. And I said to somebody this past weekend, I said, you know, it was somebody from the church that that we were going to, and I said, you know, I will never be able to heal these issues that come up because they only come up in relationships. When I'm not in a relationship, they're not there. The emotions aren't there. The feelings aren't there. The demons are not coming up for me. They only come up in intimate relationships or where there's sexual attraction, put it very bluntly.
It's because you have entered 666. That is 666. When 666, as we said, is networking, is relationship, is interaction, it's cycling of energy, it's sexuality, and this is why there's a beast. The beast is all of that stuff that we deny, that we don't like in relationships, is also the big gap between the inner and the outer. And all of the stuff we deny in ourselves. It's just that the biochemical dynamics, thank God for human bodies, of relationships don't allow us. They force us into 666. They say, okay, you are now connected, and you cannot deny anything unless you choose to sever the situation and go into some zone that's polarized from all the other zones. And there you will automatically be in a corner looking at all the other corners like a boxer in a ring. So you're going to be seeing enemies, you know, or forces that are coming at you and stuff. In a relationship, you are challenged to not see an enemy. You are challenged to see a lover and experience a lover and still deal with the same crap that you experience with your enemies. So, you know, and that's the only way to, and you say it, and spiritual people say it, we have to love thy enemy. You have to love, you know, the other side. Well, how can you love your fucking enemy if you can't love your lover? You know, or if you can't deal and love and heal all of those feelings that end up just driving you or the other person crazy, because the problem is it's not an inner world thing, it's a middle world thing. You know, you have the inner world, the outer world, and the middle world. And like you said, at least the most obvious, easiest way, and I would specify in the sense that if you're either an inner-oriented or an outer-oriented, or a person who tries to combine the two, or a sensitive individual, because like I said, there are some individuals who basically use a secure relationship dynamic, a deep friendship as a kind of coping mechanism against the world and against their own psyches. But that is very rare. If you are transformation oriented, you will have all of your challenges appear in intimate relationships because there is no place to run and there is no place to hide there. It doesn't mean you have to be in one. However, it is almost a fact, in my honest opinion, that if you are open to an intimate relationship, if you progress with your inner transformation, you will be brought into a potential relationship. It doesn't mean it's going to succeed or you're not going to be hurt or whatever. It just means you're going to be into a situation where somewhere somebody will seem to be attracted to you and there's going to be a dynamic, and then you get to confront all of the stuff you cannot confront or will not confront by yourself, or because it comes naturally if you're open to it. Just like, you know, we grow naturally from childhood into puberty and whatever. However, you know, we can still act like a child if we want, and we can still be, or we can jump into pretending we're mature or whatever. And it may not be bad. It might be our personality. But the thing is, or unhealthy. But most people, if they move into inner transformation, it will bring them into a relationship opportunity. We're not talking soulmates or happily ever afters here, or betrayals necessarily. We're talking about the middle realm, Midgard, as the Norse used to say, the middle world, which is the world we experience when we enter into a possibility of fusion with another person at the most intimate levels. It is more diluted with friends. It is more diluted with comrades. It is more diluted. It's still there. I mean, you can still move through some things with those aspects, especially if there's a sense of common purpose and ideology and all of that. However, the real crux of 666, where we all encounter the beast in ourselves, is the most intimate level of relationship. So 555 is not the answer to 666. 555 is the threshold to 666. It is the bridge to 666. And I'd like to interject with the numbers again, because again, this connects with the shofar, and it connects to comments I've made on your site about learning to discern through, understanding, feeling vibration. And just look at how our culture tries to demonize. Oh, vibes, you're talking more new agey stuff, more, ooh, this, you know, you're groovy and vibes and making fun of all that stuff. Oh, your feelings. And you see that in comedies all the time. The thing is that this is exactly the kind of sensitivity that anybody can understand. All the spiritual metaphysics, you can just pump up somebody's head full of it. It doesn't matter a damn. However, if you want to understand how to get through the crises of the world and your own psychological crises, you have to look at intimate relationship and realize that without the ability to sense vibrations, feelings, and to be able to sustain them without freaking out, and to be able to ground them, and to be able to interpret them accurately without your conditionings, you know, getting lost in the stories in your head, you cannot sustain an intimate relationship without that. It's obvious for anybody who's been there. Anybody who's been there and has witnessed a relationship collapse realizes that certain things were missing. For example, sensitivity. For example, the inability to discern between your fucking stories in your head and what's really going on. The inability to feel what the other person is actually motivated to express, what's going on in them. All of these things are necessary. Saying I love you is not a one-way street. I love you really exists like, you know, in physics we have the idea of waves, you know, so you send a wave out, but you only really perceive a wave when it returns. So when the wave goes out and keeps returning, you have a stable structure of vibration that's called a standing wave. Musical instruments would not be even heard properly as notes and whatever in music without standing waves. So love is a standing wave. You cannot just give love to somebody. People who give love to somebody and that's it, unselfishly, in the intimate context where all levels are concerned, are going to suffer because they just feed somebody else. You cannot, when you heal somebody, you can absorb energy from the environment and then you project it on somebody. It keeps coming from the environment. But if you're in an intimate relationship, you cannot do that and call it love or intimate love because there's no return. This is basically a healing or a feeding. You're doing one or the other, or maybe both sometimes, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're deluded that you think you're in a loving relationship and all you're doing is feeding, because the other person will give you then an indication that you're feeding them. They will hurt you, they will betray you, they will, do something else. So, and it's not a loving relationship if you're just the receiver. Some people go around and say, I'm loving, I'm loving, I'm loving, in order to get other people to love them, and all they have is a bunch of words and a little bit of stimulation and titillation, and they're vampires. They get fed. They draw the other person's emotions out. It gets them high. It heals them. This is forced. This is like going to a psychic healer and forcing them against their will to heal you, to lay their hands on you and heal you. Only it's done through a seductive coercion, a manipulation. These things happen. And this is what our society is doing to us. This is what the controllers are doing to us. They're vampiring us, and they're harvesting our energies in similar manners. They're titillating our emotions. They're titillating our thoughts. They're doing the same thing as a lover who betrays us does to us. And we're constantly being hurt at a level and we're constantly, doing exactly like many jilted lovers are. Where I know it's okay, So if you can see how people act in intimate relationships, how they hurt themselves, how they hurt each other, how one person hurts another, you get a very subjective, ground zero, middle balance point view of what the fuck is going on in the world. Not just in the world, to the individual, but also the individual within themselves. The same forces are in ourselves. We're talking about the shadow and all of these things. But all of these are abstract. We're biologically constructed to relate. We have 5 senses to relate to our environment. We have thoughts to relate within ourselves, but we also have our sexuality to relate at a deep, intimate level with others of our own species. And this creates a biochemical connection. It creates an electromagnetic connection. It creates a spiritual and a soul connection. An intimate relationship alters your brain connections. It epigenetically influences you. It awakens DNA. There are many spiritual practices who use sexuality, but very, very few have the daring to use true romantic sexuality, a true, intimate, loving, deep relationship, because they couldn't handle it. You love your divinity, says the mystic, and your divinity loves you, and then you can go have sex with a person of the opposite sex generally, and they will represent your divinity, but you will not, combine everything into just you and them. Just me and her, nobody else. Just her and me, or whatever, from my perspective. Because even mystics run from it. And they don't even recognize that they're running from it. So if you wonder why the world is as it is, just look at people. I mean, 2 people, they get together, one of them either runs screaming or ends up a victim, or both of them freak out. The more intimate the relationship is, the more usually between very sensual and spiritual people who are trying to become whole and are sincere in one way or another. If you have one of these types coming in with a fraud, then it's a situation of the people versus the elite. Same thing, or a vampire versus the victim. So, and we do the same thing within ourselves. So I'm saying the beast is most easily accessible as that force which tries to interfere with the success and the fulfillment of the most intimate relationships possible in our human experience. And we know this intuitively, and we fear the beast and we run away. And we give up very, very easily. And even when we realize what spiritual courage is really about, there is no greater spiritual courage than moving through a relationship, learning to discern, learning from your mistakes, learning from the so-called failures, so you can build a better one next time until you reach the point where you are courageous enough to just go for the goal. And the goal is basically, and it doesn't work in isolation. You have an internal, you need to be in tune with your inner being, with yourself. You need to be honest with yourself 100%. You need to be honest with your environment in the sense of how you respond and all of these things, and be able to discern what's going on in your environment, to discern what's going on with yourself, but also to be courageous enough to open up your heart in those circumstances and sustain it, because no matter how high you are romantically or sexually with another person, you are going to experience valleys and even abysses and crashes, because you are moving through God's biggest blessing. You are moving through the whole gamut of human experience and given the revelation of what is actually subjectively necessary to be able to make it through, both for an individual and the collective, and especially for what's the primary thing in the Bible? Adam and Eve, the primary human condition, the beginning, whether the man and his side and, who came first, the chicken or the egg, whatever, man or woman. Still, Adam and Eve, the tree of life, a snake around the tree of life, and an apple of knowledge, both of them. The who did it first and who did it second doesn't matter. They encountered 666 together. The life force moving through them, their knowledge of what that meant, the pillar, it's still a big ambiguity whether the tree of life and the tree of knowledge are two separate trees, the same tree, or, whatever, or one is really the other. The point is, Adam and Eve encountered a glitch in their relationship and realized something. And God tried to keep them, or, the biblical God tried to keep them from that level of intimacy. In the ancient fairy tales, the apple was a symbol of sexuality. Yeah. Cut the apple, you cut it in half. It looks like a heart. It looks like a toroid. It looks like the human energy field. It's and it wasn't even an apple. There are other fruits like that. But the fruit of the tree of knowledge is the same fruit we gain through our most intimate relationships, or are challenged to gain. And this is the 666 that everybody avoids because they can't even handle the 555. If you can handle 555, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to overcome or do whatever with 666. It means that you're ready to face it. You need to be energy sensitive. You need to be open to vibrations. If you're not ready and you feel intimidated, that is fine. But if you've ever been in a failed relationship, it has not a failed relationship. It was a massive lesson that taught you exactly what we're facing as individuals, as a collective, because it's undeniable. I mean, in relationships, like I said, you can run, but you can't hide. And if you do run and hide and try to, it'll come back to you because you'll get the yearning again. Because every relationship, by virtue of it becoming a relationship, has a moment of promise. I mean, in every relationship, there is that window opening to a revelation of how things can be. However brief that is, there is a sensation, there's an upwelling, and it's not a lie. Even if you're fooling yourself, it's not a lie because it's your own heart's desire. And this heart's desire isn't limited to just the relationship. That's just the seed. That's the apple that plants the tree. The seed that is taken from the apple that plants the tree. And the serpent cannot live. The serpent is on the ground, demonized as the devil, unless it has a tree to climb. All that life force that God, I thrust you down, I take away your wings. Well, no, you have to cut the damn tree down for the serpent to be divorced from it, really. And that's an illusion. The whole thing is an illusion. You never cut the tree down, or there would be no humanity. Life force still exists. 666 is the act. 555 is recognizing the serpent. 5444 is recognizing the tree and its roots. 444 tree, 555 serpent, 666, put them together. Serpent around the tree. This happens most easily in intimate relationships. And the reward is not just, especially for a person sensitive on the inside and in touch with their environment and with a sense of right and all of that. Like yourself, for example, the reward isn't just happiness and conjugal bliss, which is beyond most people's conception. It is having the keys to the kingdom. It is resolving everything on the inside and being able to resolve everything on the outside. It is the aspect of knowledge that the so-called Elohim did not want us to know because they couldn't handle it themselves. No, so exactly. It is the cosmic solution. So, and it doesn't mean we all have to do this. It just means that, look, you know, out of anything anybody can do, all the approaches, this is a definitive one for which we human beings are designed. So I'm not promoting let's all go out and get a relationship, you know. I'm just saying that this middle ground is the greatest, when you really get into it, it's the greatest risk factor on an emotional level, on a biological level even, in many ways, on a mental sanity level. And it is also the place where we avoid the most because we will always compromise and try not to. But if we really aspire and desire it, that's where we face our greatest fears. And most of the time, those fears will be realized until we gain enough of a coherence on the inside, enough of an integrity to say, I'm not going to betray myself for the sake of some ideal, because even a relationship, even the most intimate relationship, can become a projected ideal that we end up sacrificing ourselves for. Just to keep it going, we end up, you know, killing ourselves. And so we put ourselves on the altar and become, you know, Isaac and just keep stabbing ourselves and wonder why we're hurting. All for the sake, and sometimes we do this for the world too, and that doesn't work either, crucifying ourselves. And sometimes we even do this for ourselves, thinking we're on some spiritual quest, when in reality we're running and digging ourselves into a hole. So the real thing is, this is where the both and factor comes in a big way, you know, either or, because you got three elements now. You got the inner and the outer, and you go, well, how do you go both and? Well, they converge in a very natural way through your own biology. How do you open those 12 strands of DNA? You know, well, there you go. I'm not speaking of just sexuality. It's not enough. Or just love, or abstract spiritual love without the body. I'm speaking of the whole kit and caboodle. Everything has to be there. There's no way. You have to have the harmonic convergence of human DNA occurs in the deepest form of relationship. And if you're not scared shitless, then you're not entering the deepest form of relationship. That is, you know, because if you're scared shitless, it means there's so much energy that you're challenged to open up your inner channels, because fear is really excitement that the body cannot handle. And that's why it's interpreted as danger. It's almost like being overloaded. And so, well, I'm overloaded, so there must be something wrong. Sometimes there is. But sometimes if you open up your channels, you will see that it's the fear of a roller coaster ride. The roller coaster ride, perfectly safe, very little risk, whatever. And if you just open up your channels, lift your hands up and start screaming at the top of your lungs, you can have a really good time. But if you think that you're really going to die, then you can actually get a heart attack. It can be a self-fulfilling prophecy in some cases. So the fear in relationships is very much the same kind of fear. If you learn to write it and channel it and get those goddamn stories, you know, out of your head. And sometimes, see, the thing is, the stories might be true. That's the problem. And there's no guarantee that the damn stories aren't true. So you're challenged to get into your 555 mode and really get to know who you are and what triggers you, pushes your buttons, what your buttons are, which buttons are really your buttons and which have been programmed into you. So it is not easy. We're talking about 666 here. Before you go running into City Hall to kill the beast or you know, the United Nations or whatever, if there is that kind of opportunity for intimate relationship, and you keep getting it, Ron, because you keep asking for it, you know, and people say that in a derogatory manner. He asked for it, you know, or you asked for it. But it's a good thing. It's eventually the type of thing I would say keep asking for it and keep learning from it and never give up, because you're always connected to your inner world. You're always connected to your outer world. But you know, you always bring those two together, two powerful forces. The only time they really come together is when there's an opportunity. And each time you learn. And so it's all about, and if you just tell yourself, look, I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity no matter what. It's okay, because if this one doesn't work, there's always the next one. But sometimes it's so intense because you're going to find parts of yourself. You're actually looking for all those parts where you don't love yourself. You will seek out every part. So you will seek out the most sensitive things. Once you deal with all these issues, you're going to deal with what's left over. The relationship is going to bring out anything that your subconscious has mastered and covered up. And that's a good thing. So that, in my own opinion, is 666. And if you want to learn discernment, there's no better way than in an intimate relationship. If you want to learn purpose in life, there is no better way than discovering your own weaknesses and strengths than through an intimate relationship. It can be long distance. It doesn't have to be in your face. That's a whole different set of challenges, because when you are in a long distance relationship that's committed, first you're challenged to discern if it's committed or not, and if you're committed. And second, you're challenged to feel the vibe of the other person when they're not physically present. And you're also challenged to manifest a situation where they become physically present, both of you. It will not work unless both of you ultimately desire to be together. And you may want to desire it mentally, but you may, on other levels, be afraid. So you've been talking about that before in your personal, blurbs and your personal videos, the ones on a more personal theme, and saying you have to be in a, well, I'm more flexible. You don't have to. However, I'm saying that you are very much correct. I agree with you that it is one of the biggest fucking opportunities you can have to reconcile the inner and the outer. And as you move through it, it doesn't matter, because even if you say, oh, I failed, and most people might, if you succeed, you get the keys to the kingdom. It's over. I mean, but it's the new beginning. It's a whole other phase. Then everything you talk about meeting the world, you have a whole different perspective. You become a different person in the sense that it makes more sense, because biochemically you're turned on. Genetically you're turned on. Doesn't mean that you'll necessarily have psychic abilities or whatever on an anesthesia level, but you will feel a difference as a new beginning. And you will and the love that you have with that other people will inspire you in ways that nothing else can. Nobody else can then betray you, because you're already in a circuit and you're not a slave to that circuit. You're still you, because in order to connect that way, you have to be the most you can ever be. You have to be ultimately true to yourself. There's no way. I mean, relationships fail not because just somebody else betrays us, but because we're not true to ourselves. That's it. If we're true to ourselves and the other person is true to themselves, then that initial attraction can blossom. It can. But you can't force that on other people, and you can't even force it on yourself, because part of your journey may be going through steps. Part of your journey may be seeking the goal. You have to know who you are. But I'm telling anybody out there, don't be discouraged. Don't believe you have to follow a certain path. 555 is simply recognizing the sensitivity of vibrations. From there on, we use it in 666. And remember also, numbers can be organized in many different ways, but two primary ways are triads: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Don't worry about 7, 8, 9 until you are sure you can deal with 4, 5, 6. 4, 5.
Most of humanity can't.
Most of humanity is still struggling at the 4 level. The tree, the serpent, and the combination, and the apple. 6 is the apple. It's the beast. It's knowledge. It's application then comes with 7 and beyond. Forget about that. That's where the Illuminati are going to screw themselves, because that's what they're concerned about. They think they can jump over from 3 to 7 and screw us over in the process. It ain't going to happen. A second observation is that 5 is the middle. But if 5 is the middle, then you go outward. 4 and 6 are connected. 3 and 7 are connected. 2 and 8 are connected. 1 and 9 are connected. So 9 is the upper octave of 1. It's a new level of existence. 1 is the sperm of spirit, God, you might say. The light. 9 is the goddess, the ultimate expression of fertility. Combined, they become the number 10. 8 plus 2 is 10. You have receptivity, matter, drawing in the light. And number 8 is the ultimate expression of receptivity, which is the Christ consciousness, the Christ being as an embodiment of the full divinity. 3 is the number, the dynamic number. It represents vibration and action. 7 is the number of magical mastery. 4 is grounding. 6 is relationship, the ultimate outcome of grounding, and it all connects into 5. You cannot stop at 5. You're in the middle. So you stop at halfway and you say, okay, I'm guaranteed. But if you want to understand the other numbers, you can refer to the previous numbers in that way and kind of connect them. So those are just some organizational pieces of advice for those who are into the symbolism more. But the primary, I don't know what you're going to title this talk today.
I've written some notes.
I mean, I don't even know how long I was talking.
Well, you're over 40 minutes, I think, now. So.
Okay, yeah. So, but I think, you know, a lot's been included again in this talk. And many people want to hear about political situations and how we're going to resolve everything. But why isn't anything working or whatever? Some people want to hear about the inner quest. And when we talk about relationships, it's more psychological and stuff. But here, let's see if we can combine everything and look at the factor of what relationships really do to us. You know, some of us at least, those of us who are willing to, you know, take off the chest plate, the breastplate. And, you know, some of us carry the priestly breastplate with all the fancy stones that give us all these funny powers, like shofar powers. But the biggest shofar power is the internal one. Even in India, the true vibrations that would create, they use those in wars too, but actually they're internalized vibrations. And many of them were generated by couples, because the great seers of the Vedas were all couples. They all were man and wife. And these couples basically together generated, that's why they have the concept of Shiva and Shakti and all of these things. So they generated the energy that way. So shofaric energy, true shofaric energy, the Bible doesn't speak that way. The Bible, male and female relationships in the Bible are rather not equivalent, you might say. There's an imbalance there. Maybe it's implied, the deeper mysteries, but I do believe that in all of the traditions, if you look at the deeper mysteries, they all point to this mesoscopic realm of relationship. And they're not just talking sex, and they're not just talking worship, and they're not just talking romance or abstract or ideological. They're talking about everything combined. They're talking about the place where not only angels are afraid of, angels, demons, sages, everybody fears to tread. But everybody wants to go there.
Yeah, so, because it's a call.
Exactly.
Inner call.
It's the inner call. It's God's true voice. If there is ever God's true voice, if you've ever felt God, it was always when a relationship opened up and that window of hope and whatever, you know, that was the window to the true divine, beyond male and female to the true heart. That's where the tree of knowledge really, really connects. It's just that, you know, here's another one last thought before I conclude. Perhaps Adam and Eve haven't digested the fruit yet. You know, perhaps it's taken this long for the descendants of Adam and Eve that have inherited the consequences of the fruit of the tree of knowledge to actually begin digesting it and absorbing it into their DNA. So we can also consider that. That's all I wanted to say today. I hope you find a decent title for this one.
Okay. Thank you, Aristo. Namaste.
Namaste.